It's now football season, and I'm getting a lot of pre-participation physicals coming in from local high schools and the colleges. One of the biggest challenges in any athletic competition is to enhance your performance with exercise, but at the same time not outrun your exercise, meaning don't get hurt to the point of exhaustion. Sometimes what happens in a lot of exercise gyms is you'll be introduced into sports performance or sports enhancement drinks, supplements, herbs. Be very cautious about what you are introduced to, because when I see patients in the immediate care center or ER, it's usually young guys because of overdose. I've seen it several times already, and usually it's because of the niacin, but you can have side effects from massive doses of creatine or caffeine as well. That would be the more common problem. So today's talk is more on enhancement or exercise enhancement drinks. Just to narrow it down, because it's such a broad spectrum. So I thought the easiest way to show you what works and why it would be necessary to use, or what the benefits are, is to just go through a little bit of the boring stuff. Hopefully you'll be able to see this, but I'll put it on annotation for those of you who use Windows. You'll see it come up and pop up when I talk about it. Anybody who's followed me in the relaxation playlist that I have knows I talk about Herb Benson and the relaxation response. And Herb Benson is a counterpart to Hans Selye, who talked about the stress response. These were guys back in the 50s and 60s, forgive me, Herb, maybe that's 60s and 70s, who coined the terms because of the research that was coming out on what happens to the body physiologically during those two stages of living. The relaxation response is when you meditate, when you relax, when you work on breath, when you disconnect from everything going around you, and you increase your serotonin, you increase your oxytocin. The beauty of science is that now we can prove things. When you increase serotonin and oxytocin, those two hormones are also found during birth, during love, during procreation, and they're responsible for building. They're responsible for healing. The opposite happens too. With the stress response, you have cortisol, epinephrine, adrenaline. And those of you who know adrenaline, you'll see that on TV when we have somebody comes into cardiac arrest in the ER. They get a big shot of adrenaline into the heart to start the heart again. Well, those are useful in short bursts. But if you're getting big shots of adrenaline secreted on your own during the whole 8-hour of a workday or during a 3-hour game, not healthy, because it starts to fade and it starts to destroy after a while. There's ramifications to increasing the adrenaline response too long. Body's going to shut down or get hurt. Same thing with Selye. Selye was a guy who came up with the notable changes that happen when you're exposed to stress. He came up with 3 specific stages. There's alarm stage, resistance stage, and exhaustion stage. And this is where a lot of exercise physiologists have taken their ideas about muscle building and exercise and competition and based it on some of these old premises. The idea would be when you have an alarm stage to the body, whether it's muscle or the introduction of an infection or a stressor, the body gets the stress. Body's very dynamic. It can react to the stress in that resistance stage. That's when it mounts a response, whether it's an inflammatory response, whether it's turning on more muscle response, whether it's turning on and increasing the heart rate or increasing the blood pressure, a response is mounted. The idea is you mount the response and you get yourself away from the damage, hopefully. If you don't, you get into the exhaustion stage when the body can't continue with its response and you succumb to the intensity of the stressor. You either die, you get infected, you get a muscle pull, or you get burned and exposing yourself to the sun. So those 3 stages can be taken into the further development of what happens with exercise. Remember, this is all with an end point of why you should be on exercise enhancement and why you shouldn't. But then comes the idea about periodization. If you can maximize on your exercise routine and avoid the exhaustion stage, you can get into resistance and hopefully stay there right to the point of exhaustion but pull back. Right to the point of exhaustion and pull back. That's almost like cycling. Those of you who watch my high intensity interval training, that's what they do. That's what physiologists will do, exercise physiologists, trainers that are gifted. Even in the cardiac lab, when we have cardiac rehab, they'll try to train the patients to get past a certain point of exhaustion and then pull back a little bit so they can recover. The idea with doing that in intervals or doing that with high intensity is to develop a little bit of tolerance so that you can be prepared for the next stressor. In this case, it's going to be exercise. If you want to do a 4.2 40-yard dash, or you want to power lift a clean and jerk maximum that you can do, a personal record of some sort, or just beat your personal time in the marathon, you got to train and get to the point of muscle building but pull back. Otherwise you get injured, right? So that's what that periodization is. You always stay in that resistance stage. And believe it or not, when you do stay in that resistance stage, you can actually turn on, productively turn on some good hormones. There's great exercises, and I'll put a link to a 2004 study that was done on exercise. It was found that if you did interval training or resistance training, some kind of persistent exercise where you did more than sitting on a couch, 115 minutes versus 170 minutes a week, you actually would have a better response to insulin. Those of you who are exercising and you want to exercise to lose weight, well, it's important not to overexert yourself or get into that exhaustion stage, because even though you feel great and you push the envelope, your body at the exhaustion stage will secrete some hormones that are detrimental to muscle building and progress. Detrimental. They will hurt you in the long run. They'll make you gain weight. They'll make you hunt for bad carbs later on. If you get to the point where you're just in the resistance stage, you're exercising, your coach is watching you and says, push it a little bit more and then pull back after about 10 to 30 minutes, whatever the interval is, then you stay in a level where you're actually making your cells more responsive to insulin. That's an important word, because when you hit a certain point of exercise and you overexert or you overtrain, your body suddenly shuts down, the reverse happens, and your cells become resistant to insulin. And that sets up, for those of you who don't know what happens with insulin-resistant cells, it's essentially what happens in diabetes. And you later will start to hunt for bad food. You later won't be able to get the glucose into the cell because your cells are resistant. So you have to have an overabundance of sugar and exercise, because exercise provides a back door for sugar to get into the cell that's exercising. You have to have an overabundance of that to make up the difference. So it is important to hit a certain amount of minutes per week, a certain amount of intervals per exercise routine, and per preseason, for postseason, for in-season, for any of the stages of exercise. If you do it properly, and that's usually with a coach, and you get to the point where you push a little bit, it's hard to push yourself unless you're a gifted athlete. Hard to push yourself to the point of exhaustion and then pull back, and it's hard to know when that point is. A lot of my athletes, if you're watching, will kind of know because you work out in groups, especially the high school, college level. But as you get past that and you're exercising, you've got a kid at home and you want to kind of curtail, you're out there at 5 in the morning, it's sometimes hard. So this is where the exercise enhancers come in. Sometimes when it gets hard to exercise because you're exhausted. I had a guy, as I mentioned in one of my videos, on interval training or exercise, weights versus endurance. He would work an 8-hour shift, be totally exhausted, but want to do exercise because he knew it was healthy for him. And he would indulge in power drinks, sports enhancement, essentially caffeine and enhancers to get his stimulus up so that he'd get through that tough workout. My challenge to him was, even though he was getting through a tough workout, all the sugar in those drinks and the caffeine later on caused him to become insulin resistant, and also caused him to go not dump bowel movement, but his insulin would dump and force him to be seeking out all the bad stuff later on. And it might be so indiscreet that you won't notice it, but in the long run, if you keep on going for, if that guy in particular kept on going for high energy, sugar, high concentrated fructose, or drinks with taurine, drinks with caffeine at the wrong time, again, it would set them up for failure in the long run. You might be able to get through an exercise routine, but all the hormone cascades that happen afterward will cause weight gain later on, maybe even muscle breakdown. So the idea, and it even gets to the point of if you damage and you get to the exhaustion phase, or you think you're in resistance and you overdo some of the stimulants in the energy drinks, you get to the point where your cortisol and your testosterone ratio will get screwed up, and that's when you start to overtrain. You talk to anybody that's done a marathon, there'll be a point when some people know hitting the wall happens. And if you've ever run before, hitting the wall is you're feeling great, you're well hydrated, your muscles aren't cramping up, and suddenly you can become exhausted. You can't go any further, muscle aches, you're short of breath. It's an experience you don't want to go through, but that usually happens. And when that usually happens, you'll have a change in the cortisol, testosterone levels. You'll have a change in the insulin response, stress response will come out, and then you hit the exhaustion stage. And that's why it is important to hit the periodization. But for the sake of this video, with regards to trying to enhance the exercise routine, what you can do with regards to increasing, and this is great information that Jay Hoffman, I used to be one of the team physicians out of University of Central Florida. Jay Hoffman is the exercise physiology director of the lab there, and he has come up with some pretty decent studies. His study in particular was on whether sports energy drinks helped with exercise, and he did find there was a positive effect. The energy, I don't recall the energy drink, I'll see if I can find a link and put it on this video, but he tested out athletes, he tested out their productivity during the exercise, and he tested out the benefits afterward. And he found that certain energy drinks, usually caffeine loaded, would increase the responsiveness of muscle. Usually it was supposedly due to the increased tolerance to exercise volume. That's the number of sets and reps. And sometimes you can think of it this way in really easy terms. If you take in a supplement that's stimulating, like energy shots, Red Line, Red Bull, Meltdown, all these things have caffeine, they have stimulants, they have sugar. Meltdown has branched chain amino acids, glucogalactone, caffeine, and a couple other byproducts too. And if you look into some of the other common products you'll see in the gyms, Knox, some of the other supplements that you'll find in the Vitamin Shop or in GNC, a lot of them will have some basic building blocks like B vitamins, a little bit of taurine, but then they'll have these the caffeine substitutes that can be listed in several different words at high doses. You got to be careful. As I mentioned, I saw someone who just did 3 extra capsules that day instead of his usual 2, and he came in with all the side effects of rashes, flushing, palpitations, fast ideas. He couldn't stop thinking, fast and short of breath. That went away once I reassured him, once we gave him a lot of fluids. But that's a dangerous thing to go through, especially if you're an older athlete with other medical problems. If you're a younger athlete, try to avoid that stuff by picking the right supplements. So I think that the ones I mentioned, Red Bull, Red Line, Meltdown, those are the ones that Jay Hoffman has studied. And again, the theory is that if you take in enough stimulant to, remember, this is the buzzword, stimulant. All these things, these energy drinks aren't increasing energy, they're stimulating you over and above the normal because of the medicines there. And if you're somebody who already takes an ADHD medicine like methylphenidate and you take this on top, or if you have anxiety and you take the energy drinks on top, you'll definitely get a really fast workout because your heart rate, your metabolic rate will go up temporarily, but you're going to crash sooner or later. The body's going to have to pay, and usually when it's stimulated and stimulates the secretion of certain hormones, it will go the other way sooner or later. If you're in the midst of driving home when you crash, or in the midst of preparing for competition on Saturday night with your game and you crash, you're going to get hurt. So it's very important you know what the ingredients are in your energy drink. It's very important to go with the usual dose. My suggestion is if you can avoid the sugar and just take caffeine. There are caffeine pills out there, and I don't like just taking pure caffeine tablets, but or maybe just coffee or espresso or a shot of something. But if you do the sugar and the caffeine, truthfully, you're not sure about everybody has to label what's the ingredient in the supplement. But the FDA doesn't. The FDA only holds the creator or manufacturer to, you have to make sure that whatever you label is actually in your supplement. So there's no watchdog for this. So you're hoping that what you take is on the label, but certainly you can have high levels. If you go to consumerlab.com, they actually test sports enhancement drinks, and they'll test the manufacturers, and they'll call them on some of these, and I'll put a link to that. You have to subscribe to consumerlab.com, but they have great reviews on supplements. And a lot of the supplements, they'll call out and they'll say, hey, listen, we tested your product and it didn't have any of the ingredients you have on the label. And usually they'll try to make their way around, oh, it's because of this or it's because of that, when the manufacturer gets challenged. But this is why you have to be careful. I wouldn't spend a lot of money. If you don't have that much money, just go for caffeine right before your exercise routine. If you have to indulge in something like Red Bull, Redline, or Meltdown, limit it, please. And don't take double the dose if you're super tired. If you're super tired, you probably shouldn't be exercising that day. Just be careful. Always consider seeking out somebody of a coach who can watch you and design a routine for you, or perhaps one of your coaches in school to help figure out what to do in the preseason, the off-season, the postseason. That way, if you train together, if somebody's watching you, then the likelihood of you either going overboard with too many supplements or overtraining and hitting the exhaustion stage will be out. Now, this is an important part of the use of sports enhancement drinks. It is to help you with the exercise you're trying to gain, whether it's because you're trying to gain a scholarship into a Division I college, or whether you just want to get yourself a challenge to get the best personal record you can. It's always important to exercise and make it interesting. Again, to do it on your own, fine. If you have to use a supplement to get your energy level up, fine, but always know your limitations. Set the bar. If you're going past your usual and you need more, then there's something wrong. If you keep on having to use that even during the days that you're not exercising, there's something wrong. Maximize on your sleep if you can. I'll put a link to exercise and sleep. And maximize on your basic building blocks. So omega-3 fish oils, mostly a plant-based diet, a multivitamin, and vitamin D3. And hopefully you'll be able to get this, kind of curtail the amount you spend on your supplements, and then maximize on your exercise and get the best out of it.